in this session, I'm going to shortly hand over to Anna Peachey, who is the author of the report that we talked about in the last session. And Anna is one of our economic development leads here in Plymouth, leads a group of, or a team, lots of whom I think are in the room already, who look at support for cooperatives, social enterprises, support us on the inclusive growth and community wealth building agendas, community asset transfers, work with procurement on social value. So it's all the bits that I would describe as a good economy, but obviously we don't want to say that everyone else's is a bad economy. We just think that our way of doing stuff is better. So Anna's here. We want to take the opportunity just to talk about some of the practicalities of the report. When we did the report launch, we took more about the policy, but we need to turn policy into practice, and that's what this session is about. So Anna will take you through that, and we'll take questions at the end. If you want to know what it looks and feels like in a bit more reality, there is a fringe where Rachel Silcock, one of our commissioning managers, is going to be talking about developing public benefit community partnerships with Jonathan Bland, who's the Chief Exec of SBI E3M, one of our affiliate members. So you know, we're making it real, but I'm going to pass over to Anna straight away, because we all know that there is no such thing as one cooperative solution. We know that there is a plethora of cooperative solutions because people all act differently, and Anna's going to take us through some of what we've been finding out. So I'm going to slide, and Anna will
move there. That's a great background. So Andy, have we got my slides, please?
Yes, we do. Just give me a second.
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much.
No problem. Just let me know when you want me to advance them.
Yes. Could you go down to slide 5, please?
Yeah, just give me a second.
So as Chris said, this workshop is very much about developing the co-op economy in practice. So obviously, before most organisations start developing it in practice, they will often have a strategy for development. I'm not really going to go into strategy development. I am going to touch on it a little, but I'm going to assume that you will want to know what to do to make sure that you're able to take advantage of any opportunities that come up for cooperative development, as much as taking a strategic approach to it. Can you go on to the next, go down 2 slides, please? And again, and again. Thank you. So, no, up one. The people one, please. Thank you. So I'm going to go through 3 mechanisms for supporting growth of the cooperative economy in practice: people, awareness raising, and opportunities. Because I think that the most important thing is to make sure that you've got people who do actually understand what a cooperative is and how it's developed, and as Joe was saying earlier, that you have links to co-op development bodies who can step in and support you from an expert point of view. So the first thing that we found with the Cooperatives Unleashed report was that those councils that are doing this really well have got champions. And the fact that you're here at this conference means that you do have champions in your organisation. I've suggested that having a member champion and at least one officer champion is a really good idea. So having an understanding about what a cooperative is, who your cooperatives are, having a relationship with your cooperatives is one way of making sure that you are on the front foot when opportunities come up. In the report, we've profiled some of those champions, member champions, and we've talked about some of the teams that are involved in cooperative development as well. So do go and have a look for that. In Glasgow, they had an ambassador programme. When they said they wanted to develop the cooperative sector, they actually rolled out the learning about cooperatives across all of their departments, so that they had a champion in every department, and they called it an ambassador programme. So that's something really worth looking into. There's a case study in the report, and obviously I'm sure Glasgow Council would be happy to help with more information on that. We did find, page 35 of the report, we talked about roles and responsibilities in the council, and we identified 17 council services or departments, service areas that commonly work with cooperatives. So my department is economic development, but obviously people like environmental health and licensing often work with cooperatives, commissioners and procurement. So some of the kind of more common ones, but also, you know, community departments that will want to know how to kind of turn community activism into not just a constituted group, but into a viable cooperative. So those kinds of skills and knowledge and awareness are really useful right across the council, making sure that everybody really understands that this is a viable business option. This isn't at all niche, that for a lot of the work the councils do, having that kind of stakeholder engagement in a company is a really good way of making sure that the company is viable and thrives in the community. And so that touches on really that issue about capacity. We've talked about, in the report, we've talked about the kind of basic skills that are required for understanding cooperatives. We really liked the Co-op colleges training. They do training courses that are like £10 each to understand, you know, co-op values and principles and governance systems and that kind of thing. They're really worth doing. Each of my team did a whole course of them, and I'd really recommend that. Obviously, your local co-op development body can also help with that capacity building as well. It might be that you've got that many cooperatives in your area that you know, you want to get into the more detail around governance and finance, and the Co-op College does e-learning courses for all of those things as well. So really worth developing that capacity. Can you go on to the next slide, please, Andy? So touching on that, I think one of the other mechanisms of growing the co-op economy in practice is about awareness raising, both internally and externally. So a kind of a depth and breadth approach. So lots of councils that we hear about regularly within CCIN have a strategy or have done some kind of mapping of their sector so that they know how big the sector is, how many organisations there are, which sectors they're in, how many members they've got, what their turnover is like, how many employees they've got. So that kind of basic understanding is really worthwhile. But as a first approach to this, we found not all councils had looked at the Cooperatives UK Directory. So that's a really good place to start. It's available on uk.coop/directory, and you can just type in where you are and it shows you all of the co-ops that are registered within a 20-mile radius of you. We actually, in Plymouth, we commissioned Co-ops UK to do a mapping study for us. So they looked not just at the co-ops that are in Plymouth, but also the co-ops that are in the PL postcode, which we define as our local area, which was really interesting. They keep a database showing employment, turnover and membership. So it gave us a really good understanding about the kind of size and the type of co-ops that are in our local area. The other thing that we do in Plymouth, that we were doing even before we mapped them is to celebrate them. So 2 opportunities in particular for doing that, but you might have more in your local area. So we use Co-ops Fortnight, which is the last week in June, first week in July each year. The theme for next year, which was rolled over from this year, is hashtag join a co-op. So they're all about developing membership, trying to get 1 million members. So there would be a whole kind of raft of activity going on next June. So it gives you 6 months now to kind of put in place a programme, engage some of your co-ops. We, for example, had an architect that provided a free consultation to community organisations. We had lots of community events in our community co-ops. So we managed to put something on every day, and then we tend to try and host a breakfast for our co-op so that everybody can get together. And this year we did that online, and there is a video available which I'll tell you about later. The other opportunity to promote your co-ops is Social Enterprise Day, which this year is the 19th of November. It's always part of Global Entrepreneurship Week. In Plymouth, we turn it into Social Enterprise Week, or even Social Enterprise Fortnight, and our Social Enterprise Development Network will put on a programme of activities, again, 1 or 2 a day, sometimes 3 a day, really highlighting the work of social enterprises, and we like to make sure that there's a bit of co-op stuff in there as well. So 2 real opportunities there. You might have business awards, that kind of thing, where you can highlight the work of your co-ops and the successes of them. So really worth celebrating them, both to try and increase their visibility. You know, they might have kind of sales targets that they want to increase. They'll be really glad of the extra marketing, but also perhaps they might be looking for board members, they might be looking for new employees, they might be looking for new members in particular. So it's worth a chat with them. And that brings me on to the 3rd point here, to support their growth. So in Plymouth, we've got a business relationship programme that includes all of our co-ops, which means that we have a deeper relationship with quite a few of them. It means that we understand what their growth aspirations are, and we can support those. So we will have a communication mechanism with each of them. Some of them will be one-to-one, some of them will receive newsletters from us, and we can put out information about things like Co-ops Fortnight and Social Enterprise Day, but also funding opportunities and procurement opportunities that are relevant to them. So that's the awareness raising package. I think it's really important to underpin the kind of growth aspirations for the co-op economy in your area. Andy, could you move on to the next slide? So bringing that all together is obviously identifying opportunities and knowing an opportunity for co-op development when you see one. There's quite a lot staggered through the Unleashed report that covers this, lots of case studies. We found that there are lots of policy drivers that can lead you to identifying opportunities. But I don't really want to go into the policy in too much detail, except to say that making sure that your kind of internal policy is joined up is really important. So, for example, there's lots of asset-based development of cooperatives. It's really liked by social investors, for example, if there's an asset attached to the development of an organisation. Glasgow did a kind of a big credit union development strategy where they supported lots of their credit unions to expand into new, more prominent or bigger branches. In Plymouth, we did several asset-based co-op development. One new co-op development opportunities. So one was Plymouth Energy Community, and you can see the solar array there. Another one that we did was the co-location of health and wellbeing based suppliers in one of our deprived communities, the Four Greens Community Trust. So having an asset that you can kind of support development of your cooperatives with is really useful. The CCIN have done a policy lab, or in the process of doing a policy lab around community asset transfer. So look out for that. It should be out in the new year. I think the thing about community asset transfer is joining it up with the opportunities to develop those organisations. So making sure that whoever your co-op champions are actually understand where your assets, where your community assets are, and what the opportunities are to make those available to your existing or new co-ops is really worthwhile. I said I wouldn't go into depth about strategy development, but I do just want to touch on it as I talk about sectors, because we found that the councils that we looked at that had developed strategies had identified key sectors for co-op development. So there's a national strategy that Cooperatives UK produces. These are all page 24 of the report if you're interested. So the Co-ops UK Co-op Development Strategy identifies things like culture, heritage, housing, health and care as key sectors. Manchester also looked at the digital economy and transport. Glasgow also looked to finance and business services, creative industries, low carbon, life sciences, engineering, design and advanced manufacturing, tourism and education. And in Plymouth, we also, we had 5 that were included in those, but we also talked about municipal cooperation. So we explicitly wanted to look at opportunities for developing cooperatives and to public sector services. The other one that we've done in Plymouth is fishing, and there is a video available about the development of the fishing co-op. Hopefully one of my colleagues will post a link to it as we're talking. Thanks, Jane. So lastly, talking about anchor institutions, obviously that kind of community wealth building opportunity that Matthew Brown was talking about earlier, and Plymouth have done lots of, and Sunderland were talking about it in their community wealth building strategy. It's the golden goose, really, the idea that we can develop new cooperatives that are located on public owned land, so there's community asset transfer element to it. We try and get multiple anchor institutions as clients for those, particularly in the early stages, so you've got a diversity to the client base for those companies, which makes them more resilient. So that really does mean that those cooperatives that develop have got all the advantages of, good client base, strong governance, secure tenancy. So that really is, as I say, we kind of see it as the golden goose, but it does mean bringing together your community asset transfer policy, your capacity building in-house, your policy, your economic development, planning, strategic projects, all of those different aspects of the public sector all need to kind of come together around those opportunities. So it can be harder to do, but it's definitely worth lining up all of those things to do it. So can I just have the next slide, please, Andy? So we're going to move on and just take questions for the last, so we've got 20 minutes left. I really just wanted to highlight that really our top tips, as I've talked to the team about this presentation, we think that the particularly important things are about looking at those opportunities in your councils that are being developed for post-COVID recovery. So there could be some really early wins there, where there's an idea that's, you know, perhaps already in train, perhaps there's some funding being identified, and really making sure that there is an explicit conversation about how could this be made a cooperative? Is there a cooperative solution to help with that development? So really identifying for every opportunity the council looks at, that there's a discussion about cooperative opportunities. Second top tip is that expertise in-house across members and officers. We really like the CCIN officers network, really good network. Nicola's done an amazing job at supporting us to talk to each other, and we highly recommend doing more of that. As Joe was saying this morning, a relationship with the co-op development bodies. And I know Nicola has put a huge amount of effort into developing the dynamic purchasing system that makes sure that as councils, we can procure expert support quite easily from that dynamic purchasing system. We don't have to go through it from scratch. And lastly, know your sector. You know, have a look at the directory at the very least, and make sure that you have detailed conversations with at least some of those organisations on a regular basis, so that you really understand what the current economic context is like for them, and what it's like to develop a business, but a cooperative in particular, in your locality. So that's the kind of overview of practical ways to develop the co-op economy. Are there any questions? Certainly, thank you to my team for posting links throughout the presentation. That's really helpful. I can't see any hands up. Are there any questions from anyone about the report, or any comments about what you're doing in your council, particularly the COVID recovery strategy development and opportunity spotting, that hopefully we can all work together to overcome challenges to making those as cooperative as possible?
Hi there. My name's Morgan Jones from Cheshire West. Just wondering, is there something in the kind of the culture or the history of Plymouth that means that cooperatives makes so much sense locally, or that has really helped to develop your approach?
Yeah, I mean, Chris might be the best person to answer that, because I suppose the short answer is yes, that we do have members who have a history of, you know, being involved in cooperative development, but also, you know, from a union point of view, and understanding those kinds of democratic processes. Andy, are you able to switch to Chris to answer that?
Chris should be able to answer, no problem.
I mean, they've got an echo. Sorry, the tech has been playing up this morning.
If you mute
Hannah's just
your
muting the one that we were
laptop,
both using earlier, because mine's now back on. Yeah, Plymouth, the first co-op in Plymouth set up in the 1860s. There is a history of cooperation. It's interesting in the box, which is our new museum and art gallery. So I've just been muted.
Sorry about that. We've actually got in the box the new museum and art gallery for Plymouth, evidence of cooperation through the years in photography, but also in whole housing estates being built by our local cooperative. And sorry, the tech continues to go wrong. It's now Anna's not being able to mute her machine. So we have a background. It was a background of one cooperative society reaching into just about every area of the city's life. And after the war, the co-op had more remaining asset in the city than almost anyone else. So was integral in rebuilding the city as a whole. The leader of the council used to be part of a worker co-op and has a long-standing history in the cooperative movement. And so I think there's a political lead, but also a sense, even if 150 years after our local co-op as a society merged with the cooperative group, that people can remember something of education, women's development, and all sorts of other things that happen through our cooperative. And I think that has helped us enormously. But we are in some ways also starting again from scratch.
Thanks, Chris. That's really helpful background. I think the other thing that's really taken off in Plymouth is the kind of systems approach. The idea that you can't tackle one public sector challenge in isolation. That actually you need to look at health and community cohesion and economic development and public health, or all these different challenges for the public sector, all kind of work with each other, and cooperatives are an amazing way for delivering on that, because they do enable you to really marry environmental and economic and social goals. There was a hand up.
Yeah, that's me. It's Clive Fraser.
Clive Fraser.
Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. I think what Plymouth's doing is very inspiring. Two things for me is, one is obviously that there has been cooperative history and culture in the past, but in terms of local authority, how has the culture changed over the last few years? How you managed to embed that in terms of the Office of Co-op? And secondly, I think in Croydon we have an opportunity, because we are very close with the NHS, which is co-terminus, and the hospital and CCIN, to work with them as an anchor institution. I just wondered what your experiences in Plymouth with working in NHS, and have they been able to buy into what you're trying to do?
So I think we've always had those kinds of partner relationships with other anchor institutions and other organisations across Plymouth. I think we had a really early go at developing integrated health, for example, which Plymouth was one of the first to kind of make that happen. So those kinds of relationships are viewed very positively in Plymouth. That idea of partnership working and collaboration. We're a relatively small city, 260,000 citizens here in Plymouth, but quite a large city area in terms of employment and supply chains and commuting, for example. So understanding, how we work with the local authorities in the vicinity as well. We're one of the first councils to have a joint local plan with our neighbouring councils, for example. So those kinds of relationships have been developing for a while, and I think as awareness has happened of things like the problems of having separate social care and health systems became apparent, and the idea of integrated commissioning started to be talked about, then Plymouth was in a really good place, really, to make those relationships happen. I think there's a really strong will here to collaborate and have those difficult discussions and overcome the challenges of working together.
Yeah, I think integrated commissioning was an important first step, as though integrating CCG and council budgets on health and social care and other commissioned areas are really an easy win. They're not, but we've been doing that for a number of years quite successfully. So integrated teams and looking at whole systems. So we've got some fairly major work, and I'm sure Rachel will be picking up on some of that in the fringe that she's involved in with Jonathan. But we're looking at what more we can do. So you heard it here first, and please don't talk about it because we've not announced anything yet and aren't until next month. But the hospital trust is looking at us, or looking with us at working on part of the recovery being about spend. And we've got a number of key institutions in the city, including health, education, and some of our private sector businesses, who are looking at how we spot gaps in the local supply chain that we could meet by setting up community-owned businesses, especially cooperatives, to deliver that, and how we can continue to drive up our local spend. Once again, you heard it here first. We've taken local spend from the city council now up to 55% of our spend. It was 14% in 2012. So, and we've got an ambition to take it another 10% higher than that. So we're doing it, but our other anchor institutions are way behind, and if they start increasing their spend, that will be a very big boost to our local economy. It would be fair to say that both the CCG and our hospital trust are really keen on that as our community health providers. So we've got good work to build on, and we're looking at cooperative values and principles underpinning all of that.
Thanks, Chris. Clive, did that answer your question? I notice your hand is still up.
I meant to take my hand down, but I think that's a good answer in terms of working with institutions. But it's really the issue about how you manage to change the culture within the authority and how that's engaged with officers. I think that's always the biggest challenge we face in local authority, for officers to grasp cooperative ideas and not to be politics.
I think we started that back in 2012 when we took control, and we've made sure that our involvement in CCIN is not just about me turning up at meetings. So from very early days, our commissioning stuff was because we took at that point a commissioning officer along with us to an event in Lambeth that CCIN ran, where they, amongst other things, showcased their cooperative commissioning approach. Craig is now our director of people, so he's seen a fairly meteoric rise. But we have made sure that we introduce people within the council. I'm supported by the assistant chief exec and a member of the policy team. We make sure that officers get to hear about stuff. The officers network is actively engaged in, and we also have political lead. So once you've got political levels, CMT level, and you're involving officers across the council in doing things, you begin to change the way people work. So our chief exec has had face-to-face meetings with lots of council staff, right down to grassroots level, frontline workers, about what we stand for, what our values are all about, and how they deliver those in their day-to-day jobs. And we've got very high recognition of our values within the full councillor officers cohort. So those sorts of bits, but they've taken us years. But what Anna was saying earlier, whether it's about cooperative development or being a cooperative council, it's about getting your champions and ambassadors at every level who can see what you're trying to do. Early on, I had a council officer come up to me and say, for the first time in my working life in the public sector, and she'd worked in the public sector all her life, I've now got people telling me that their values match my values. And the reason she was doing public service was because of all the things we were now talking about as a cooperative council. I enthused her to do more. She's now working in the health sector, but that reboosted her. And I think there have been lots of other people who felt the same, that the reason that they're motivated to work for the council is often more than just the pay packet. And if we talk about cooperative values and principles, actually that tends to chime with why they want to work with us.
Chris, I'm minded that I'm actually sat in front of one of our corporate plan posters. Perhaps you want to say a bit about when it was that the council actually created that kind of vision about an outstanding quality of life that's enjoyed by everyone, a mission to make Plymouth a fairer society where everyone does their bit, the values that include cooperative, fair, responsible and democratic, all reflecting the co-op values and principles. Yeah,
that plan was created in 2013. Obviously, in 2012, we inherited a corporate plan when we got elected. Our vision is a citywide vision. It's been in place for a number of years. Our mission was one that we created. We pinched everyone doing their bit from Oldham. Nothing wrong with that. And that actually isn't just a poster. What Anna showed you was the top half of our entire corporate plan. So we're really upfront about it. We've got a plan that fits on an A4 page, and I'm sure that one of the team can put a link in the chat to it if they can quickly find it online. But we worked that through, and that took us a year, and we began with educating Cabinet and the CMT and scrutiny leads, and then that cascaded down through the different parts of the council and people involved in helping shape that. We found that in 2018, when we retook the council after 2 years, it hadn't been tweaked much, and another exercise very quickly brought it back and gave it the real direction. Interestingly, because it's so simple, our partners are also picking up on it. So it gets talked about in a similar way by the police, by health, by the universities, all three of them, by the chamber, by our big industry partners, because they can see where they fit very easily and see where they need to do their bit to make things happen.
Thanks, Chris. So I guess the answer really to Clive's question is that there are kind of lots of incremental stages to this. It starts at the top end, the kind of lower ranks of the hierarchy and the staff, and you spread it out from lots of different places in the council. So easier said than done, but as Chris said, it does chime well, I think, with people's values. Are there any other questions? We're just coming up to 12 o'clock, so I guess it leaves me to say thank you very much to all of you, and I'll thank you for listening. I'll hand over to Chris to just wrap up.
Great, and thanks a lot to Anna. She's been working with me now for just over 18 months, I think, since she took this role, and we built a unit of 2 into a full team, and that has made a real difference to the way we've approached a lot of things. And actually, during COVID, Anna not only did all her job, but she led on our business grant support and lots of relationship building that went with that, and has been working to support us on the voluntary community sector, and now is helping us on the food agenda as well. So Anna's been doing a lot of stuff. In the middle of all of that, she's also written the report that we've been talking about, and is now preparing the next stages for November, when we'll publish some more in-depth case studies with some toolkit suggestions and so on as well. So really positive work. So thanks to Anna, plus Jane, Erinch and Patrick, who I think have all been putting stuff in the chat, but the work they do with her is really important. And once again, to CCIN for funding the piece of work, and having faith that this was the right thing to do. Chris Herries inspired me to push for it in the first place, and I'm sad she's not here to see this coming forward, but this was exactly what she was trying to do as a councillor and cabinet member before she retired, and also then to the team at CoOps UK who worked with us on it, and to CoOps College who've facilitated this piece of tech. I think the issues have been at this end, not anywhere else. So thanks for bearing with us. You've now all got chance, I think, to get a cup of tea, stretch your legs before you get into the fringes, and so enjoy whichever one of those you see, and we'll see you tomorrow morning with Steve Reed.